Hi, Rich LEITER here, and welcome to my channel, Thoughts on Writing. When I was growing up until the very recent past, I had a very, very simplistic view of art, of Western European art, and of painting. And by the way, I consider myself actually, I'm not an artist, but I consider myself actually to be actually more educated concerning art and art history than most people, most lay people. I mean, I've gone to museums my whole life. I love looking at pictures. I have several videos on my channel posted of my own, stabs at painting portraits. So, I take more than just a general interest in this stuff. But in spite of that fact, I feel that my interest, my understanding, my knowledge and understanding of art and painting is very crude. Like most people, for instance, in a very general way, the way I grew up, you had two kinds of painting, right? You have representational painting, painting that could be done by really talented people who knew how to paint stuff that looked like stuff. You painted a face, it looked like a photograph, it looked like the person. You painted a pitcher full of wine or water, it looked like a pitcher, right? So there was the kind of artist who could do representational painting, and then there was all the other stuff, this abstract stuff. That's very crude, but that's the way most people think. Almost all of them think, I suppose. And of course, well, not everybody. I don't want to be too simplistic about it. In my general understanding of it, you had representational painters who could really, really paint exactly like the old masters, Rembrandt and Titian and Michelangelo and Raphael, and then you had your impressionist painters, and I always thought impressionist painters just painted little dots with little brightly colored dots. And if you were really sophisticated, you knew that there was something called expressionism, or German expressionism. That's if you were really advanced, right? And then beyond that, you had your abstract expressionists. Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko and de Kooning, everybody knows them, right? And then beyond abstract expressionism, it was kind of a free-for-all, right? It was just people painting crazy stuff, It was all crazy, and the general public looks at this crazy stuff and they sort of titter. They'll watch it, they'll go to a museum and watch it, but they don't know what the hell it is, and they kind of ridicule it, and I kind of ridicule a lot of it too. And that was basically my sum total of my knowledge of art history. Then, what happened was about a couple of years ago, I happened to start listening to this fellow. His name was Paul Rhoads, Rhoads, and he created his own channel, and he had he's an artist living in France. He's a practicing artist, and he started his own channel, and I began listening to his videos. And then he had some video. I think he got kicked off of YouTube, and he then went to Odyssey, and now he's back on YouTube. But anyway, so I began listening to him, and I was very intrigued by what he had to say over the last couple of years, and that was it. I don't know Paul Rhoads. I've contacted him a couple of times, but he's not my relative. He's not. Paying me to say this, and I'm not a groupie of his. I'm not an art fanatic of Paul Rhoads, anything like that. This is just my opinion. So anyway, I found out that only recently Paul Rhoads has written a book, and the book is called. Let me show you what it's called. It's called Art in the Age of Anxiety. Oh, let me see. Art in the Age of Anxiety. So he wrote this book recently, and I began reading it, and I really like it. So I've been meaning to do a sort of an off-the-cuff book review of it. I'm not the greatest book reviewer, and I stopped taking copious notes. I'm just going to speak off the top of my head. I have a few notes here, but that's it. This book has kind of expanded my understanding of art and art history enormously. And I realized, listening to his lectures, but particularly reading this book, Art in the Age of Anxiety, I realized how crude my understanding of art history was. And I considered myself relatively educated, He talks about so many things. First of all, just because somebody can paint a picture very realistically, almost with photographic precision, does not mean that it is a good work of art. I bet 99.99% of the public equates the two. Photographic realism, great art, and I didn't feel that way, but I certainly admired it. And Paul Rhoads puts it in perspective. I mean, there are many, many different types of representational art. From the old masters, going through neoclassicism, going through what's now called classical realism. He's got a lot to say about classical realism, none of which is very pretty. So there are many, many things to be said about this. It's way beyond this crude assessment of realistic painting that I used to have, and Rhoads has this view of things. He says that there's such a thing called true painting, and true painting consists of the proper balance between the decorative aspect of art, of painting, and the illustrative aspect. And what he means is the illustrative aspect of painting would be analogous to the representation of it as a familiar object. You're painting a portrait of a person. The extent to which it looks like that person would be the illustrative aspect of it, as opposed to the decorative aspect, which is the decorative aspect, the aspect of it which is the color, the way the lines are put down on the canvas, for instance, the kinds of brush strokes that are used, the texture, all of these things that give the painting its charm. And he says that you have to have the right balance between those two elements. Just being completely realistic, just getting every mole on a person's face, does not make it a successful work of art. It has to be poetic in some way, not just clinically realistic. And so he goes on about this all throughout his book, the decorative versus the illustrative aspect, and of course he gives many, many examples of what he's talking about. So it's not at all vague. It's very clear cut what he's saying. Like I say, I've never heard of this before. I've never heard of this theory. I've never heard of the particular vision which Rhoads has about painting. It's specifically about painting, not so much sculpture, but it's more about painting, Western European painting. So I've never heard of this. I mean, I've read a couple of art books. I mean, Jansen's art book, the book that's like 99,000 pages long. I've taken stabs at that, like everybody has. I've read who's this guy? The former director of the Metropolitan Museum, Thomas Hoving, wrote a book, and a couple of other books I've read, and these books all kind of document. They document the various trends in art all throughout history. They note all of the different schools and all of the different trends that have taken place, developments in art, but they just kind of note them, they document them, and they don't tie it all together. And what I like about Rhoads' book is he does tie it all together. He gives us his own cohesive vision of what painting is all about. Whether you agree with it or whether you don't agree with it, he's very, very specific about it. He's very eloquent about it. He's very, very scholarly about it, although this is not by any means a scholarly book. The guy has an almost encyclopedic knowledge of Western European painting. But he doesn't overwhelm you with it. It can be read by any layperson. So I was sorely impressed by that. Now, there were a couple of things about the book that I liked. I think I've touched upon it. The first thing is that whenever an artist, and Rhoads is a practicing artist in France, the first thing is that, whenever in my experience I listen to artists talk about painting or talk about art, it's usually unintelligible. It's kind of artistic psychobabble. They have their own particular lingo, which doesn't mean much to me at all. And Rhoads is one of those rare artists who can actually articulate his ideas very precisely and very persuasively. He has certain passages in his book which are extremely eloquent. I mean, this guy knows how to write. So it's not psychobabble. It's not something which you're not going to understand because he's loopy or he's going way off someplace. Not at all. And the other thing is, it's not even. The funny thing is, when a good book, I think when a good book is written, it's never just about the specific ostensible subject at hand. Any good book is kind of written about everything. And this book is written about a lot of different stuff. It has a lot of personal reminiscences in it, which I liked very much. I found them very entertaining. Rhoads grew up, I think it was in New York City in the 60s and 70s. Actually, he's around my age because that's where I grew up. I grew up in New York in the 60s and 70s. I used to go to the Guggenheim, the Metropolitan Museum, all these places. But of course, at that time, when I was growing up, I wasn't really that interested in art. I was too troubled by my nutty background, my nutty family life. So I couldn't really focus on art to the extent that I would have liked to. But anyway, Paul Rhoads grew up in New York in the 60s and 70s, and this was at a very crucial time back then, when representational art was being banned. I mean, it was being vilified. You couldn't show it if you were in a gallery. I mean, the art police had dictated that representational painting was out. And being a representational painter, Rhoads suffered cruelly. He was vilified. He was cursed by people, you know, for being not an abstract painter or a contemporary painter. And he talks about this. He peppers his book with personal reminiscences, which I really like. So that's basically what I wanted to say. I mean, I don't read, you know, lots of philosophy these days, or the philosophy of aesthetics. I haven't read Kant's aesthetic philosophy. Maybe before I kick the bucket, I'll get around to doing that. I don't know. But this book was a pleasure to read, and it was a very, very informative book. And I doubt that I will look upon art the same way that I used to. I certainly feel that I am much better informed to look at a painting now than I did before. And whether you agree with Rhoads or not, I mean, this is a book that I think should be discussed publicly, frankly. I mean, we have enough books talking about justifying, legitimizing, and rationalizing why an artist's feces put into a tin is art. We have plenty of books about that, okay? I think it's time to give a little of the attention and the spotlight to other people who have intelligent things to say about art, and not just about art, about how we got to where we are in art, which is about which involves politics, political science, history, a lot of stuff. So I would urge you to read this book, whether you're an artist, a professional, or whether you're a layman. And I'll leave some links below for his book. And also, I believe he has started actually reading a couple of excerpts from the book. So if you want to get a good idea of the flavor of the book, the style in which he writes, I'll leave some links for that as well. So that's it. Thank you very much.